always feel like dusk is a time of day when things resonate in a certain way that to me is very, maybe it's a little bit scary, but it's also deeply comforting too in some way.
I don't have too much of a formula really for it. I put colors on my palette as I need them. So I don't start off with colors all around. I just kind of grab them and look for them and add them as I need them while I'm painting. But just a couple of things about palette, just from my personal experience. It took me, for the longest time I didn't really understand what warm and cool colors were. So that when I was in undergrad and I was in a textile class, I took painting and textiles, and the professor used my work as an example, and she said, do you see how she used all the cool colors over here and all the warm colors over here? And I looked at it and I thought, oh, is that what warm and cool are? But I always thought of what were thought of as cool colors as warm and hot. And I always thought as what people thought of as, I twisted them around in my head, in my imagination. That was how I felt about the color. And so I don't know why that is, but it took me a while to kind of understand. Since then I had to teach, and so I had to teach what warm and cool colors were. But I've never felt about them in that way. So, and the other thing that's just about palette is that I think that whether you're painting abstract, landscape, figurative, whatever you're doing, in some cases, if you're doing a more old master kind of style of glazing, let's say, to bring up the flesh tones, you really do have to have some kind of very more formal way of outlining your palette. But if you're doing another kind of painting, you don't necessarily have to follow those rules, right? So I think that other than just personal experience with color, I think for many artists it's also the kind of painting that you're doing that kind of dictates, how you're going to go about your palette.
So I worked as a decorative painter and kind of a trompe-l'oeil painter for many years after college, and so I was always working with interiors and mixing huge amounts of paint, and I learned that I absolutely love seeing like a bucket of wet paint. Like it's just so delicious to me. And so I mix kind of big jars of colors and intuitively, but I've always had this. I think one of the things I love about I think there's something magical about painting, I guess, and I find that I have these bizarre coincidences happen to me around colors when I start using them. For example, some of these paintings, the ones over there, are painted on this particular gray ground, and it was a color, it was just sort of accidentally, it ended up being the color that my youngest son's room was painted. Like I didn't even know that. I mixed it carefully in the studio and then kind of went into his room and I was like, no way, that's the color of his room, that I just mixed. And then also I was teaching that semester and it happened to be the color of the kitchen of one of my students, but like the color is so specific, and it's like I could have laid the chips on top of each color and you wouldn't have seen the difference. So I think it's to me it's a deeply intuitive and unconscious thing, and I suppose I'm definitely a Jungian, so I believe in these coincidences and these synchronicities, that there's something kind of powerful at work, and to me that the palette is a really big part of that.
Painting makes you psychic.
Absolutely.
I kind of go along with Anne. It's just my mood, how I feel.
Color is really important for me, and I think the colors almost choose me for the painting, or like the way they end up. They kind of become their own destiny, I guess. That sounds weird, but sometimes I'll start with two colors. I'll want to combine, like I like using these kind of I like kind of attacking colors that I can't stand. Like I'll be like, oh, I'm gonna take this like really sweet pink, and then I want to see what happens if I put it next to this like earthy color. So sometimes when I'm starting, I'll I'll just start with something like that, like, okay, I'm gonna use this green and this pink, and then, and then it goes on from there. And then I can't, then I can't stand a color, and then I have to paint over it or whatever, and then it evolves. But the colors end up often determining what it's about, or it's the clue to me about what the painting is about. For my whenever I paint, if there's a particular red and turquoise combination that I realized at one point were the stripes on this bathing suit, hand-me-down bathing suit I had when I was a kid. And it was such a specific memory. And the colors will always be that for me. And I don't know what it was with this bathing suit. But I love the power that color has to just take you instantly to a place. But in terms of palette, I keep kind of a traditional arrangement on the palette, but then, 3/4 of them are all kind of dried up, and I just keep putting stuff on top and grab stuff as I need it, or, I'll just stare at the tubes and a color will jump out, and then I just go from there.
I have a little afterthought. David, I think you reminded me of, I don't know if anyone else took the Albers color theory training class or whatever, where you learn about the relational aspect of color, and that was, I use that all the time in thinking, and the simple color wheel, I think that reality, the way when you think of as impressionist painting, where the full spectrum of color comes, that sort of visual, the pointillism and impressionism, where it reads back a sense of completeness because of all of the interconnected sort of opposites in the color. I think that that's something that I see that operating, or I think about that when I'm choosing color. So there's mood is on the one end of the spectrum, but really then there's these kind of, theories and tools that help you navigate from one to the other as you're through a piece. So I think it's interesting that those mechanisms that are have different drivers for color.
I think you just put your finger on something that's pretty important, probably for all of us, is that we would say, it seems like a lot of us would say, well, we respond to mood, we work intuitively, and yet that intuitive stuff is informed by a lot of experiences actually struggling with and making the work.
Yeah.
So if you want to be really honest about it, it's a little bit like a musician might start learning a phrase by counting, and they count their way through a piece of music, maybe very awkwardly, and eventually it starts becoming like a song. And at some point they're just playing from the heart, and it's really intuitive, and that's what makes it so great. On the other hand, it's probably not just intuitive, because that intuition is informed by all kinds of other experiences. And I just felt like that's, if there's any students in the room, for students that's probably an important thing to keep in mind, because you want to bump up against these learning how colors work off each other and all that stuff. You struggle maybe with some things that almost seem a little bit outside of yourself, and yet at some point it becomes much more almost like a kind of second nature that you can work with on your own terms.
I think for me, all this brings up this color theory, right? Color theory has its place, and I think it came to me late, because I never had a color class in any of my education, and as I said, I was all mixed up and screwed up with color personally, for whatever reason, and then eventually, I started teaching myself some of this Albers, and I have the book, and then the other book, what is the other big book on color by Itten, yes, thank you, Itten, which is another, taking more of an intuitive approach, right, to color. And I think that reading that did open things up for me, and it's something that I kind of keep in the periphery, you know, that I kind of understand these things, but then, you know, I try to forget them at the same time, you know, so it's kind of a push and pull with color, and I think it's fascinating to see artists who I feel are really colorists. I mean, they just, that is like the backbone of, you know, what they're doing. And I don't consider myself to be a colorist in that way. I think actually there's a lot of intuitive work that is in this gallery concerning color. Maybe Mike Childs comes closest to what, you know, to this more of a kind of colorist attitude using color. But you know, there's a lot of intuitive stuff happening in that work too with color, I think. It's a whole world in itself that it's fascinating.
I'm just looking around, and I know I think about this, but looking at the paintings, I know you guys think about this too, but the idea that groups of colors together connected or paired or contrasted with other groups of colors can talk about an area of a painting which is lit up versus an area of a painting which appears to be in shadow, even though it's an abstract painting and there's no representational imagery. You know, the sense that, right, the colors can talk about darkness or light, or they can move forward in the painting and push back. I mean, all of those are skills I developed through observational work, and then once I started working abstractly, I found myself doing the same things, just not as connected to, you know, not connected to a recognizable motif in the same way. And it seems, as I look around, a lot of people use color in those ways too.
That was great. It was wonderful to hear your opinions about your palette and how you approach how to construct a painting. I'm going to open it up to other questions if the audience feels so inclined.
No, it's okay.
Oh, sorry.
I recently had this one art history class where we were discussing about, we had a debate actually. It was about how people think that designer, I'm a designer, how people think that the designer is an artist. It's not relevant, but since you guys are here, I think this is like a good platform that I can know what do you guys think, if designers and artists are equal, or there's like one that is above each other.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if we get to hear the question.
I think you can be a great designer, you can be a great artist, and I think this sense of, you know, there's craft versus art, or a trade versus art. You know, what happens is there's a functional element, like a designer has usually a criteria that maybe is, a client has the criteria for, you know, solving a particular problem, and, you know, we think of the problems that artists solve are not maybe of a practical nature. It's more in, you know, an expressive realm versus, so, but I think I don't see like a high-low there. I think there's, you know, masterful craftsmen, or masterful design, masterful craftsmen. It's really a sense of the purpose of whatever the endeavor is, in my mind.
I would agree with that. I don't see a hierarchy of somehow artists are better than everyone else or worse than everyone else, or that one form of working is somehow better than another. I just don't see that at all. Abstract painting has its things it's really good for. It probably has some limitations. You know, design intersects with how we live our lives in everyday ways that we're maybe not even conscious of, in terms of what happens when we enter a space architecturally or where, I mean, there's so many funny little ways that design affects us in all kinds of ways. And it can be really passive-aggressive, or it can be very humane. And there's so many ways to bring it to it. So I think that maybe the more interesting question is that if you're going to be working in design, to just really jump ahead to the next question of, well, what is it you want to be doing in design? What kind of designer do you want to be, or how do you want the work to affect people? And you might end up coming up with some weird kind of hybrid that doesn't even exist yet, that intersects between aspects of design and aspects of so-called art, So I wouldn't worry too much about a hypothetical debate assigning who's higher than who, literature, dance, architecture, painting, everything's hard. Anything you do is going to take everything you've got and probably more. But if you're doing the work that you really see fit, that's what maybe calls the shots.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far, and I think that design art, there's no hierarchy there for me. I mean, I think it's very important for artists to be exposed to design, and I think it's important for designers to be exposed to art, and I think that drawing across the board and observation and learning to be an observer is key to all of it. And then you just go to the place you need to go with that.
This is something we talk a lot about in my school. I teach at an art school that's pretty evenly split between designers and illustrators and fine artists. And I certainly don't see any kind of hierarchy, but I'm always so interested in the ways that the fields are very different. And it's, I find students tend to end up in places which sort of suit their natures more. I think designers and illustrators often have a client and have an obligation to be clear and direct. Painters, not so much, right? And so, if you design the signage for a train station and it's kind of unclear which direction you're supposed to go, you're going to be out of a job pretty quickly. But often paintings are about ambiguity and nuance and complication. And I think, I find that students tend to be better at being clear or at being vague in a provocative and interesting way. And as they go through school, they kind of find themselves in one of those two places.
It's like design solves problems and painting causes problems.
I would tend to agree with what everybody said.
I will add one other thing, and this will bring Bill Jensen into it. I know you mentioned Bill in the question list. I studied with Bill in grad school, and I remember when I first started, when he was first looking at one of my paintings, I went, my art school was very kind of, formal, and then Bill's class was more, he's very much emotional, kind of spiritual. But so he was looking at this painting of mine, and I was like, oh, I don't know. There's a problem. There's still a problem. I'm not happy with it or something. And he just looked at me and he was like, painting's not a problem to be solved. And that I think is the whole thing. I think you nailed it. The design is you have. You've been given a task to create something. There are usually a certain number of rules related to it. Whereas painting, and of course not for everybody and not for all types of painting, but is more of a sort of a search and an exploration, and they're just different. Some designers, some artists kind of meet in the middle a bit, like some artists are more designers and vice versa.
When you're going to do a painting, how much, probably need a microphone, when you're about to do a painting, do you think about it beforehand? Do you plan it out? Formally, choosing color, or do you just put paint down and let the painting space talk to you? Or I know you start out with an emotion, because that's what I hear from you. But how much planning is there in your painting when you do that? I mean, I'm primarily self-taught. I paint portraits in watercolor by commission. I have to plan my painting out, not only to please my client, but also in some respects using colors that will fit the room that lady wants to put it in, including her clothes. So I have to plan I have to draw it like there's no tomorrow, and then plan it so the colors I put down with each wash work out right. And I'm trying like hell to understand abstract art, because I'm coming from 180 degrees from abstract art. Although the placement of where I put what I put is based on having an abstract concept within the space that I'm putting that head or body or group or whatever. And I look at the paintings here, and I'm trying to get meaning from it. I can get an emotion by looking at an abstract painting that has a lot of emotion or good color, and I sure as hell can appreciate painting them. But I'm trying to get some concept because I would like to try abstract painting, and I just want to know your methodology in going about it, so to speak. And that's why I'm here.
Okay, anybody want to field that?
Well, for me, I start by, I have kind of a drawing attitude at the beginning, even though I'm working with color from the get-go. But I'm sort of just mapping out where I think I'm going to go. So it's probably not completely unlike what you're talking about, where you get sort of a vague sense of where you think you're going. And if in your case, it might be, where's the edge of the head, where's the ear, where's the shoulder, whatever. In abstract painting, it's different than that, but I still feel it to be almost like neural pathways through the painting. It's almost like there's this invisible circuitry that I'm sort of working to find. And then
towards a focal point?
There isn't necessarily one focal point, but I do want things to exist in a particular kind of tension to one another. So in my case, there's maybe 2 or 3 main points of tension in a particular painting that's asymmetrical.
Okay.
So much of the work process is painting things in, also painting them back out. I put on paint, I scrape it back out. It's subtractive as well as additive. And I get rid of some of the little things that don't seem important and try to get it down to what I feel is like the underlying visual structure. And so for me, that has something to do with the way a few simple elemental shapes sort of nudge against one another.
So that's where you start and play it by ear from there?
Yes, so that after day 3, the painting might look similarly finished or similarly unfinished to how it looks 7 months later when it's really resolved. It doesn't necessarily look that different to maybe a casual observer's eye, but to me it's very different because I can't rest until the painting locks in a particular way and everything is working off of everything else in a particular way. I want everything to be necessary and nothing to be extra. So editing is a big part of it for me. And so I just wanted to say that right off the bat in response to your thing, because I know that several of the other works here have probably a real different methodology.
I think a lot of artists that I speak with say that they need a starting point, and whether it's a schematic, which is more of what you're talking about that you do, is you come up with some schematic, and you go from there, and it's very practiced, right? Or some artists that are coming from another point of view, or painting not for a client, but in their studio painting themselves, need to mess up the canvas or something. Need to put a wash on there. Or I know when I work, sometimes I use a silk screen, and I'll make a silk screen because the marks that I make on a silk screen are quite different than the marks I make with a brush with oil on pad or canvas. So I'll screen an image on, and then I have something to respond to.
So you're waiting for that painting, however, whatever stage it is, to talk to you,
Yeah.
to go further. But do you have a feeling that you're looking to convey to the observer?
I do. I usually have something in my head, and then the best way I can explain it, a quote comes to mind from George Braque that the artist Archie Rand once shared with me. Braque was asked, how do you begin a painting? And his answer was, and this is very much what I think I go through, I stand in front of the canvas, a blank canvas, with an idea in my head, and the rest of the process is the painting defending itself. That's what it is.
I think a lot of, I certainly have ideas for structures before I start my painting. For me, I think about a really well-executed athletic act, like a dive, or if anyone's a skier, a great run. You need to know enough about what you're doing that you kind of there's no ambiguity, but then how successful it is, it depends entirely on the moment, on the performance of that activity. So I try to find ways to have enough structure, but enough openness to allow for a performance. And for me, I work very quickly, and I make lots of paintings that nobody sees. I often start with anywhere, with no idea at all, and I'll just make like a bunch of little paintings that don't mean anything. But then, to me, the idea of paint as a medium, that it does show you something, and that slippage between what you intended to do and what it actually does, that's the most exciting thing as a painter. That's where it talks to you and says, like, no, you want to do this. And so I'll make a lot, and then I'll see in them, and for me it's often like, like that painting, there are probably 4 paintings that preceded it where I kept coming up with the idea. Sometimes I'll make the same painting 3 times until I get one that feels like it's right. For me, it's a very quick process. It's also very wasteful. I wish I could find a way to do it differently.
So it's analogous to a watercolor painter,
Yes.
putting colors down and
Kind of.
playing with the canvas or the paper
It's on that.
to see what happens.
And then saying afterwards, wow, I really liked it when that drip went over there and I accidentally put that line over there. Let me start the next time with putting a line there and turning the paper in that way. Sort of finding in your process things to start with the next time, I guess. But I think for me, the amount of work is really important.
Okay.
I don't start with any kind of plan. I just jump in. But I'm definitely a person that struggles with the blank canvas. Like I have to get something down right away. And then once something's down, like you're saying, Cecilia, then you just kind of start responding to stuff and reacting. And there's a lot of time spent just sitting and staring and waiting for the painting to kind of guide you. Okay. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. I had my daughter was 6, maybe was home from school, so I'm like, well, I'm not missing my studio day, so I took her to the studio with me, and she, was sitting there all wrapped up, and I was sitting in my chair just staring at the canvas for a while, and because that's honestly half of what I do is just stare at them and try to figure out what the next thing is. And she was all of a sudden she said, "Mommy, what are you doing? Like, get to work." But it's the goal is to allow the painting to be what it wants to be, even if it's something, I mean, sometimes they make me so uncomfortable, but yet they do have a will of their own, and they do.
Like where?
Well, yeah, and yeah, I mean, the goal is to have the painting kind of become its own thing. Like, I feel like there's something that happens where it stops becoming paint on canvas at a certain point and is almost like its own thing, and there's no more moves. It's really sort of solidly asserted itself.
So you're painting essentially for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're hoping that the viewer who comes in from left field can feel the emotion that's in it?
I like to think about it's like accessing the universal by painting the particular. You know, like the more honest I am with what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling and what I'm putting into the painting, the hope is that will strike a chord on some level with someone else. And, or that, it will trigger something. It will feel like something that they'll want to look at it and think about it. Or hate it, I mean, that's anything, just to react. The worst thing is to have somebody just kind of walk by the painting.
I've walked by a hell of a lot of paintings.
Yeah.
I could add one thing. In addition to staring at the painting, I sometimes go to sleep in my studio. I have to kind of just get to a really clear-headed state. And I think a lot of times we have our busy days and we're thinking, oh, I'll squeeze in a little time and jump into the studio, and it's like my head is so full that I actually just need to like close it all down and then come back up. And I start with usually the sort of Rorschach-like drip, like you were saying, I mean, a shape, and that takes me someplace. It sounds like the process that you're interested in is one where you become the client. There isn't anybody but you who's going to decide.
If I'm painting a portrait for myself, I feel a lot freer because I don't want to get through a painting and the client says, you made my nose too fat, or this is off, or my house cleaner doesn't like it, so can you do me something? So when I paint for myself, it's a pleasure. And I'm trying to get looser in the doing, and came here to say, well, if I can talk to some abstract artists, can they give me a clue as to how I can progress into not becoming an abstract artist, but to improve my own work? And that stands true whether it's a portrait or whether it's a landscape, because I'll do landscapes when I can't get a commission. So.
One more thought. Sure. An early teacher of mine said, take care of these cryptic things that stuck with me, take care of your affections, and it just stuck with me all my life. And I think the less I care, the more I do this entirely for myself, the more fun it is and the better my work gets. But that's like a hard thing. It's easy to say I don't care. It's easy to say I'm doing this just for myself, but I find that in all kinds of ways the world, other people's expectations or judgments or I find it very hard to stay centered in my joy all the time. But I think it's, the amazing thing, I think, is that when you are there, it just sort of gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and ultimately that's the best thing about being a painter. Maybe that's why it's such a pain to be a painter, because you also get that.
I had one. I've been dying to ask you, Peter, if you could just tell us a little bit about your idea for the show and why you wanted to do it, and how you feel about the show. Since
Sure.
You've been the one, you were like the mastermind.
Well,
I find abstract work just fascinating. And in my own work, I bounce from figurative to abstraction, and I call them kind of seasons. And somebody mentioned Philip Guston, and of course, we're all familiar with his late style of figurativization. And I wondered why he couldn't do figurative and abstraction at the same time. And of course, now today, artists do that, and some artists are very, heightened awareness of trying not to be pigeonholed. And, Kira Hardricker, of course, Forrest unto himself, and Sigmar Polka a little bit. But anyway, getting back to the show, I think I was, it grew out of a need of trying to have abstract work come into its own terms. I think a lot of people feel intimidated by non-objective work, and so it's part education and also just really trying to create a high quality of kind of a survey of what abstract artists are working on today.
Well, I'm probably speaking for everybody, that it's just been a real super pleasure to be part of the show, and an honor to be shown with this group that you curated. Further thoughts?
Thank you.
Thank you.
It really has been a pleasure being. And these words, reality and abstraction, for me, it was a tough title when I saw it, because I thought, I don't like to use those words, but I've been very pleased to be in this company of artists and the show.
Oh, great.
Me too.
What she said.
Thank you, Peter, for inviting me. It's a wonderful, wonderful show, and thank you for the audience for showing up, a wonderful audience.
I think everyone's covered it. Thank you, Peter.
I can hear it all day.
We could sing it.
Yeah. So if there's any other questions, or maybe we should just wrap it up. So thanks very much, guys. Thank you. That's great.
And I really love the.
Hi guys. So do you have attendance today?
No, it's the way it takes on.
So do we need a
Well, if you're looking to do this for an extra credit, yes, you can either do this as an extra credit or the other assignment with the date. Yeah, one or the other.
From a distance, I'm
Yeah,
almost
one or the other. But I tell you what, if you write something about this, almost accidentally. Thank you. Well, it should be, no.
Have you been to the show?
distance.
It's a great show.
Oh, okay, but not for this one.
I know.
Yeah, right. And I didn't do that.
You're right.
But I mean,
I mean, the huge thing is, all those boxes, one after the other.
Originally,
Yeah.
paintings of just, study art history.
My wife and I have just been
But for now, I don't know.
using out the teaching.
Okay, but thanks for coming.
Yeah, they don't choose a different
Yeah, we do. Well, thanks a lot. I'm enjoying your paintings too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's an organic.
Yeah. 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 No, yeah, exactly. I have yeah.
I always I like working with because I am one of those scientists up there. All the work that was including three of us that I designed.
Where are you going?
From
Great. Oh, that's such a nice time.
Doing, especially when you're stuff like
Yeah.
I've had a couple of that, they're crazy, but once you get them up, you're like, oh, this is nice. One of my, I posted a picture of the panel on social media, one of my friends worked on the panel. Because,
What's the name?
she said in part,
No. He's like totally.
University, I think it's the University of Hartford, she recognized, she recognized her, and she's like, I know one of those.
Oh my God.
And some of her pieces are probably in there.
Did you hear Benji come from? He goes, "When are you gonna
It's only a painting, it's only a picture.
Oh, I know. Hello, little miss. Did you come in to touch me? Just for your research. Yeah. You guys got all worried. Oh, you ready to go, I guess? All right.
This conversation is
Oh, wow. All right. Let me get Benji's sweatshirts. You guys got all your images and stuff? You're the leaf in your hair.
You're showing me.
Do you want to get a coffee or something?
I'm not in any hurry.
I mean,
Do you have a train or you have a?
I have scheduled for the train, so we can.
Let us know when you're gonna be in town, whatever, go see some shows together. Oh, okay, great, yeah.
The work that, the first painting. Oh, my work. My husband's family.
That'd be great.
Like the mother people.
It's like 5 days after
I'm like, no.
Say no to everything. When you're doing it, so it's so great. I just figure it's like, be immersed. Yeah. You have a lot of like just things to disconnect in life. Well, yeah, and it's so it's been hard.
Yeah. It's a better game. It was a small group, but I think they were very into it. Inquisitive, so that's
Don't worry about stuff. Seriously, there's a story there. You can stuff that you don't need. That's no big deal. And you'll probably end up chasing them.
I know, that's the other thing.
Using something that you
I have painter friends who are like, just take other stuff
Yeah,
that you want to play with.
right.
It's like, even coming today, I'm like, oh, it seems so weird to just go, like, maybe we go to like.
Thanks for coming.
I also like.
Well, it's nice to
and small.
I told you that on the.
Well, we
And I
talked
should-
about that because last year,
I meant to,
I'm ordering extra light.
I feel like hands are my source, because I was gonna read those comments this way, and then I was like, so pissed off. I didn't really do anything.
Point of view.
You take a photo from right here, you almost see the angle side.
And how's your work going? Is it just a little bit on hold until you get to?
Yeah.
It's
been really strange because I switched over this year, and that's been hard to just get into anyway, but to do a bunch at once is really hard. I was like thinking of you, like, when you were saying the waste. Oh my God. I think about paper versus canvas, you could just power through, but then, I mean, unlike the canvas, it's like I'm having trouble, like,
You want it,
getting
like,
different
doing the rendering of
pieces to
the-
work
Yeah,
with.
no, I appreciate
That's
that.
the way I like to work.